What if I told you that the single biggest reason you're not catching fish this January has nothing to do with your bait, your spot, or your luck? It's that spool of line you trust so much. Today we're talking about line thickness in the dead of winter. And it's a topic that is loaded with myths and bad habits. I'm going to show you why going thinner, even when every instinct in your body screams against it, might be the key to your best winter season ever. There's a fundamental reason why the old-timers get this one wrong, and it's probably not what you think. We're going to dismantle that old logic, piece by piece. So, let's start with a little honesty. Let me know in the comments right now. What pound test are you using for perch or walleye in January? Let's see where everyone stands before we get into it. For generations, the message was simple: thicker is better. It was hammered into us. Don't be the guy who loses the fish of a lifetime because you were using a line that was too light. That logic makes perfect sense in July when you're pulling a base out of thick weeds or dragging a catfish off a rocky bottom. Strength and abrasion resistance are king in those situations. It's a habit passed down from summer fishing, a security blanket we carry over into the winter season without a second thought. But January is a completely different world. The rules change, the entire environment is hostile and unforgiving, and the fish behave like aliens from another planet compared to their summer selves. Applying summer rules to winter fishing is like trying to drive a nail with a screwdriver. It's the wrong tool for the job, and it's the reason so many anglers stare at a motionless bobber all day long. First, let's set the scene, the January reality. The world above the ice is cold, quiet, and harsh. The world below the ice is just as extreme. With a thick layer of ice and snow covering the lake, sunlight struggles to penetrate. This creates a darker, clearer water column than you see at any other time of the year. All the algae and sediment that cloud the water in the summer have died off and settled. The water is often gin clear. You can see your lure 20 feet down in some cases. This isn't the murky, forgiving water of summer where a fish has to make a split-second decision to eat. In January, the water is a sterile, clean environment where anything that looks out of place sticks out like a sore thumb, and that includes your fishing line. We have to start thinking like a predator in a silent, clear world, not a brawler in a summer swamp. This clarity is the first piece of the puzzle, and it's working against you. Now let's talk about how this clarity becomes your enemy. Think about it from the fish's point of view. A perch or a walleye in January is not an aggressive eating machine. They are cold, their metabolism has slowed to a crawl, and they are conserving every bit of energy they have. They aren't going to chase down a meal. Instead, they will slowly approach it, study it, and inspect it with extreme prejudice. In that crystal clear water, they see everything. They see your jig, they see the bait, and they absolutely see the line it's attached to. If you're using 6, 8, or even 10-pound test monofilament, you're not presenting a tasty morsel. You're presenting a tasty morsel tethered to a thick, visible rope. It's an immediate red flag. It screams danger and unnatural. For a fish that has all the time in the world to make a decision, that visible line is often the only reason it needs to turn away and ignore your offering completely. This leads us to the lethargic fish factor. Understanding a fish's metabolism in winter is crucial. They are cold-blooded creatures. When the water temperature plummets, so does their body temperature and their need for food. They might only eat once every few days. This means they are incredibly selective. They are not in a competitive feeding frenzy. When they do decide to eat, they want the easiest, most natural-looking meal possible. They are looking for something that triggers a primal instinct, not something that raises suspicion. Your job as an angler is to make your presentation absolutely irresistible and 100% believable. A tiny, delectable waxworm dancing on the end of a thick, stiff line is a contradiction. It's like seeing a Michelin star dessert served on a dirty paper plate. The presentation ruins the product. The fish sees the flaw, and its energy-conserving brain tells it to pass. It's not worth the risk. Let's try to see the world through a fish's eyes for a moment. A fish's eyes are designed for its environment. They have excellent close-range vision, and they are masters at detecting movement and contrast. They are hardwired to spot things that don't belong. Now imagine a tiny jig, maybe 1/32 of an ounce, designed to imitate a small insect larva or a tiny minnow. In the dark, clear water, this little jig is supposed to look like a free-floating, easy meal. But when it's tied to a line with a diameter that is a significant fraction of its own size, the illusion is shattered. The fish doesn't just see a jig, it sees a jig and line system, it sees the puppet and the strings, and it knows there's a puppeteer somewhere above. This is especially true for lines like monofilament, which have a much larger diameter per pound test and are far more visible underwater than something like fluorocarbon. You're giving the game away before the fish even gets a chance to commit. That line becomes a red flag. Let me give you a scenario. You're sitting in your ice shanty watching your fish finder. You see a big red mark slowly rise up from the bottom to investigate your lure. It hovers there. 1 second, 2 seconds, 5 seconds, and then it slowly sinks back down. No bite, nothing. You're left wondering what you did wrong. The answer is you may have done nothing wrong with your jigging cadence or your bait. The fish was interested. It came in for a closer look. But in those crucial seconds of inspection, it saw the line. It saw that unnatural connection to the surface, and its survival instincts, honed over thousands of years, told it that something was wrong. That hesitation, that moment of suspicion, is the difference between a bite and a refusal. And a thicker, more visible line creates that suspicion almost every single time with picky, lethargic winter fish. So let's be clear about how suspicion kills the bite. It's not always a dramatic spook where the fish darts away. More often than not in winter, it's a quiet, subtle rejection. The fish simply loses interest and drifts off. You might not even realize it was a possibility. You might just think the fish aren't biting today, but the reality is you're getting looks. You're attracting fish. Your presentation is just failing the final exam, the up-close inspection. The thicker the line, the more likely you are to fail that test. This happens dozens of times a day for anglers using the wrong setup. They mark fish all day, but they can't get them to commit. They blame the weather, the barometric pressure, or the bait when the real culprit is dangling right in front of the fish's face. It's the equivalent of a loud, clumsy hunter trying to sneak up on a deer. The deer knows you're there long before you even see it. Now let's talk about something just as important as visibility. Lure action. This is where thick line becomes a double agent, working against you in two ways. Every lure, especially the tiny ice jigs we use in winter, is designed to have a specific action. It's meant to flutter, dart, or spiral on the fall. It's supposed to quiver subtly when you shake the rod tip. This movement is what mimics life. It's what triggers the fish to bite. However, that delicate, engineered action is completely dependent on having a thin, supple connection to your rod. When you tie that same jig to a thick, stiff piece of monofilament, you might as well be tying it to a steel cable. The line is so rigid and has so much memory that it completely dampens and restricts the lure's movement. It kills the action. The lure can't flutter properly. It just hangs there or plummets like a rock. It looks dead. I call this the thick line anchor effect. Imagine trying to fly a kite with a heavy rope instead of a string. The kite would never get off the ground. The rope is too heavy, too stiff. It's the same principle under the ice. A line that is too thick and stiff for the lure's weight acts as an anchor. It prevents the lure from moving freely and naturally. A 1/16 ounce jig is designed to be fished on something like a 2 or 4 pound test line. The diameter and suppleness of that line are part of the system. When you jump up to an 8 pound test line, the line's own memory and stiffness dictate the movement, not the lure. You can be the best jig fisherman in the world, but your skills mean nothing if your line is strangling your lure and preventing it from doing its job. You've essentially taken a finely tuned instrument and decided to play it with a hammer. The result is never going to be pretty. Here's a real-world example you can test for yourself. Go home and fill up a sink or a bucket with water. Tie a small ice jig onto a piece of 8-pound monofilament. Now drop it in the water. Watch how it falls. It will likely just drop straight down, maybe with a slight wobble. The line will probably have some coil in it. Now cut that jig off and tie it onto a piece of 2-pound fluorocarbon. Drop it in the water again. The difference will be night and day. The jig will spiral, flutter, and glide on its way down. It will look alive. It will have action. That is the action you are losing every single time you drop your lure down the hole with a line that is too thick. Now imagine a fish watching those two presentations. Which one looks like an easy meal, and which one looks like a piece of lead on a string? The answer is obvious, and it's why the guy with the light line is getting bit and you're not. Now it's time to bust some myths. Let's start with the big one. You need thick line for big fish. This is the number one argument I hear for using heavy line in the winter, and it is fundamentally flawed. Yes, a big walleye or a lake trout has the potential to break a light line, but the context is completely different from summer. In the summer, a big fish might run for heavy cover, wrap you around a stump, or drag you through abrasive weeds. In those cases, you need the heavy line to horse the fish out and resist the abrasion. But in the middle of a frozen lake in January, where are they going to go? There are no weeds, there are no lily pads. It's just an open water column. The primary battle is in open water, where the line's breaking strength is less about abrasion and more about shock absorption and a properly set drag. You are not horsing a winter fish, you are finessing it. Let's dig deeper into the truth about winter fights. Fish in 40-degree water or colder do not fight with the same power and stamina as fish in 70-degree water. Their muscles are cold and their metabolism is slow. They will make a few good runs, but they tire out much more quickly. They don't have those long, sustained, powerful runs that you see in the summer. The fight is more about weight and head shakes than raw power. This means that a good quality 2 or 4 pound test line paired with a rod that has a soft tip and a reel with a smooth drag is more than capable of handling even very large fish. Your drag system becomes your safety net. It protects the light line by giving out line when the fish surges. You let the rod and the drag do the work. Trying to muscle a big winter walleye on heavy line is not only unnecessary, it's often counterproductive. So what about abrasion resistance? Is it overrated in winter? For most situations, yes. The primary source of abrasion in the summer is rocks, wood, and heavy weeds. In a typical winter basin, those things aren't really in play. The only real point of abrasion is the edge of the ice at the bottom of your hole. This is a legitimate concern, but it's easily managed. The key is to play the fish carefully and to always be mindful of where your line is. When the fish gets close to the hole, you need to manage its head and guide it up through the center. If you let a big fish run sideways at the last second, it can absolutely cut a 2-pound line on the sharp ice. But this is a matter of technique, not a reason to use a line that is 3 times too thick and prevents you from getting bites in the first place. It's better to hook 10 fish and lose 1 at the hole than to not hook any at all. So what's the solution? The solution is the invisibility cloak, thin fluorocarbon. Fluorocarbon line has a refractive index that is very close to that of water. This means it bends light in almost the same way as water, making it nearly invisible once it's submerged. For the hyper-aware, suspicious fish of winter, this is a massive advantage. When a fish comes in to inspect your jig tied to a fluorocarbon line, it sees the jig, not the entire system. This eliminates that primary red flag we talked about. It allows the lure to be the star of the show, and when you combine this invisibility with an ultra-thin diameter, like a 2 or 4 pound test, you have the ultimate stealth presentation. You are giving yourself the best possible chance of fooling a fish that has spent all day rejecting clumsy, obvious offerings from other anglers. Beyond just being invisible, let's talk about how thin line breathes life into your lure. We did the sink experiment, but let's think about it while you're actively jigging. A thin, supple line creates a more direct and sensitive connection to your lure. When you impart a tiny shake with your rod tip, that energy is transferred directly to the jig, causing it to quiver and dance. With a thick, stiff line, much of that energy is absorbed by the line's memory and stiffness. Your subtle movements are lost in translation. The jig barely moves. Using a thin line allows for a level of nuance and finesse that is simply impossible with heavy line. You can make your lure dance with the tiniest movements of your wrist. This is what triggers neutral and negative fish. It's that subtle, lifelike quiver that convinces them to open their mouths. It's the difference between a puppet on a string and a living creature. And then there is the holy grail of winter fishing, sensitivity, the ability to feel the bite. Winter bites are notoriously light. It's often not a thump like a summer bass bite. It can be as subtle as a slight tick, a feeling of mushiness, or your line just going slack as a fish inhales the lure from below. Thick monofilament has a lot of stretch and a larger diameter, which deadens your ability to feel these subtle cues. Thin diameter fluorocarbon, on the other hand, has very little stretch and provides a much more direct connection. It's like the difference between trying to feel something with thick winter gloves on versus your bare hands. With a light line, you will feel bites that you never even knew you were missing. You'll feel that tiny tick as a perch sucks in your tungsten jig, and you'll be able to set the hook before it spits it out. You are effectively upgrading your own senses. Let me paint you a picture of a classic on-ice experiment that I've seen play out dozens of times. Two buddies are fishing. They are 10 feet apart, fishing the same depth and using the exact same lure, a small tungsten jig tipped with a wax worm. They are both marking fish on their electronics. Fish are coming up, looking at their jigs and then leaving. But there's one key difference. Angler 1 is a traditionalist. He's spooled up with his trusty 6-pound monofilament. He's not getting a single bite. He's frustrated, complaining that the fish have lockjaw. He's convinced it's just a bad day and nothing can be done. He's been at it for hours with the same result, marking fish constantly but failing to get a single one to commit. His confidence is shot and he's ready to pack it in for the day, blaming everything but the one thing he can actually control. Now let's look at his buddy, Angler 2. Angler 2 is fishing right next to him, experiencing the same conditions. He is also marking the same fish on his sonar, but he's spooled up with a 3-pound test fluorocarbon line. He drops his jig down the hole. A fish rises to inspect it just like it did for his friend, but this time the fish doesn't turn away. It hovers for a second, and then his rod tip gives the slightest little bounce. He sets the hook, and he's fighting a fish. He pulls up a nice perch. He drops back down, and a few minutes later, it happens again and again. By the end of the day, Angler 1 has caught nothing. Angler 2 has a nice pile of perch on the ice. Nothing else was different. Not the spot, not the lure, not the bait. The only variable that changed was the line. That's not a coincidence. That is a direct result of a superior presentation. The results just don't lie. This isn't some fringe theory. It's a proven tactic that the best ice anglers in the world rely on. They understand that in the chess match of winter fishing, a stealthy presentation is their queen. They might carry rods rigged with everything from 1-pound test up to 6-pound test, but they will almost always start with the lightest line they think they can get away with for the target species. They only move up in size if they are getting broken off. The default setting is light, not heavy. The old way of thinking is to start heavy and only go lighter if you're not getting bites. The new, more effective way of thinking is to start as light as possible to maximize your bites and only go heavier if you absolutely have to. This simple flip in mindset is often the only thing separating a great day from a frustrating one. So, you're convinced? You want to make the change? What do you actually need to buy? You don't have to break the bank. My advice is to get 2 spools of high-quality, ice fishing specific fluorocarbon. Get one in a 2-pound test and one in a 4-pound test. The 2-pound test will be your go-to for panfish like perch, crappie and bluegill. The 4-pound test will be your workhorse for walleye or for situations where you might hook into a bigger predator. Make sure you are buying line that is specifically formulated for ice fishing. These lines are designed to stay supple and manageable in freezing temperatures, unlike some standard lines that can become stiff and coiled. Spool it onto a good quality reel with a smooth drag and pair it with a light or ultralight rod with a sensitive tip. This complete system is designed to work together to help you detect bites and protect that light line. Finally, let's tie this all together by talking about your most important piece of equipment in this system, your drag. Your reel's drag is your best friend. With light line, you cannot simply horse a fish in. You have to learn to trust your drag. Before you even start fishing, set your drag properly. You should be able to pull line out with a steady, firm pull without it jerking. It should be tight enough to get a good hook set, but loose enough to give line when a fish makes a run. When you hook a big fish, let the rod and the drag do the work. Keep your rod tip up, maintain pressure, and let the fish run when it wants to run. When it stops, you reel. This dance is how you land a 5-pound walleye on a 4-pound test line. It's a more engaging, more skillful, and ultimately more rewarding way to fish. And it all starts by spooling up a line that will actually get you the bite in the first place. So, let's recap. We've established that the clear, cold water of January makes fish incredibly spooky and selective. We learned that the old thicker is better mentality is a summer rule that kills your presentation in the winter. Your thick line is not only highly visible, but it's also murdering your lure's action and dulling your ability to feel the bite. The real turning point, the aha moment in all of this, is realizing that your fishing line is arguably more important than your lure. We spend so much money on fancy jigs and high-tech electronics, but we often fail on the most fundamental connection between us and the fish. The simple act of switching from a 6 or 8 pound mono to a 2 or 4 pound fluoro can be the single most impactful change you make to your ice fishing success. It can literally transform a dead, frustrating day into the day you talk about all year. Thank you so much for watching. If this video made you rethink your setup, do me a favor and hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next video. Now for the final question, and be honest, now that you've heard all this, are you brave enough to spool on 2-pound line for your next trip out? Let me know your honest thoughts and fears about it in the comments below.